Okay, I think we can start. So, good afternoon, everyone. First, thank you for attending this conference about the Pew Latin American Fellow Program. So, in this opportunity, we have to Kara Coleman, who will provide us all information about this program. So, we are very thankful for this for share these opportunities for our students and our professional in Cayetano Heredia. So, Kara, you are welcome. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your knowledge about this program and offering opportunities for our students. So, welcome. You can start, please.
All right. Let me share my slides. Okay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to talk today about the Pew Latin American Fellowship Program, and thank the organizers for inviting me, and especially Andrea Cuentas Condori for connecting me with your university to talk about this program. So the first thing I just want to start by saying is just to give you some information on me and my team that run this fellowship program. My information is on the screen here, and I just want to show the faces of my staff to hopefully give you the impression that we are very welcoming and accessible for any questions you may have. So anything that we may not get to today, or if you have questions in the future, please don't be worried or concerned about reaching out to us. Our job is to help you all if you're interested in the program. So I have my email address here, but then we also have a general email box where any of my staff can go in there and get it. So it's a great way to get in touch with us. So again, we're here to help, to tell you about the program and to answer any questions you may have. So I'm going to start just by telling you a little bit about Pew, the organization, and then I'll jump into the specific grant program. So the Pew Charitable Trust is a public charity based in the United States, and it does a lot of different things, actually. Our organization has about 1,000 staff members, so we do a lot of different things. And Pew itself, the name, P-E-W, this is a family name. So a family, the Pew family many, many years ago founded an oil company, and they made a ton of money. And so they decided to take that money and create a nonprofit charity where they could, fund grants and give back to certain causes in the community where they were passionate about. So the organization started in the 1940s, really just giving grants to things in the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area, which is where the family was from. And then the work has really expanded over the past 75 years into a lot of different things. So my team works on biomedical grant making. That's what we'll talk about today. Pew also has grant programs in marine research and ocean conservation, and also gives grants to organizations that do health and human services work in Philadelphia. Again, as their home city, the family likes to give money in that area. Outside of just giving grants, Pew also does a lot of advocacy and policy work. So there's a large office in Washington, D.C. here where the groups that work on these issues are trying to get policy changes made by the U.S. government in certain areas. So they work on things like ocean conservation, land protections, and a lot of different topics. It kind of changes. They might work on a topic, get a policy change over 5 years, and then move on to another topic. So I have our website link here, but it's kind of interesting. It's a very interesting organization that does a lot. But today we're here to talk about grant programs in biomedical research. So my group runs the 4 grant programs listed here: the Pew Biomedical Scholars Program, the Pew Stewart Scholars Program for cancer research. These 2 I'm only going to talk about briefly. They are to fund a later level in the career. So we provide grants for assistant professors at U.S. institutions for these top 2 programs. Today I'm going to talk really about the Pew Latin American Fellows Program, and then we have a fourth program called the Innovation Fund, and that's actually an award or grant that is given to alumni from the other three programs. And I'll talk a little about why we have that as I go through the presentation. Okay, so the Pew Latin American Fellows Program. It was actually started in 1991, so it's been around for over 30 years. And every year, so we run one competition or application cycle a year, and we fund 10 individuals from Latin America to come to the US and conduct postdoctoral research. The grant level right now is $30,000 US per year for 2 years of postdoc work in the US. Though that dollar number is supplemented by the sponsor whose lab you're working in. So in the US, the National Institutes of Health, or the NIH, they publish guidelines on what postdoc stipend should be to try to make sure there's an equal level there. And it's higher than this $30,000. So we require that whatever lab you go to, make sure that they are paying you at the NIH pay level. So they have to supplement on top of the Pew funding. One of the most unique part of this grant is that in addition to providing funding for individuals to get a research experience or training in the United States, is that if and when you return to Latin America to do research at a university there, we provide an additional $70,000 US to purchase lab equipment and supplies to start your lab in Latin America. And there's not many grants that have this kind of component. So one of the goals of this program is really to help these extremely talented scientists who have gotten training in the US to go back home, start their own lab, and give you the startup funds to do that. Another key part of the program is while you are in the program in the US doing your postdoctoral research, we have an annual meeting that I'll talk a bit more about, and it's required, of course, outside of any sort of health issue or sickness, that you attend that meeting every year for 3 years, and that is all expenses paid by Pew. I have our web link here, and I'll be happy to send these slides to the organizer after this meeting, so you can get the links and information off of these slides. You don't have to write it all down. So I want to take a step back and kind of tell you how the program has looked in the past and what we're working on in the future. So as I said, it started in 1991. So to date, we funded just over 300 fellows, which is really great. We get about 70 to 80 applications per year total, so from all of Latin America. And again, we fund 10 of those every year. Now, historically, the majority of the grantees and the majority of applicants are from Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Mexico. So if you go to our website, and we have a directory where you can search and you can see everybody we've funded since 1991, you're going to look and say, there's no one from Peru on here, or there's 3 fellows from Peru on here. This isn't a program that looks like it's for me. So that's something we're currently trying to address. And one of the big issues, I think, is that we haven't done a good job, my team and I and our organization, of promoting and working on our network in countries outside of the 4 listed here. It's been interesting because the majority of grantees have come from Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico. That's where we have the strongest networks to help us advertise the program. And so it's been kind of it's been a problem, right? We're not advertising and getting the networks we need in other countries. So again, I'm really happy to speak to you today so we can help change that. And it's already started over the past couple of years. I looked back at some of our data, and over the past 10 years, we've only had 11 applicants from Peru. And over 10 years, we've had 775 applicants. That has started to change. We've had more the past few years. We've had 2 fellows awarded, both one in 2020, one in 2021. including Andrea, who's connected me with you all today. So we are making progress. So I just want to say, just because you're looking at this website and you don't see yourself represented here, we're actively trying to change that, and we are really excited to get really fantastic applicants from Peru moving forward. And so, as I mentioned on the prior slide, really the key and unique component of this program is the money that we provide for equipment and supplies for a lab in Latin America after you've done your postdoc in the US. So far, about 70% of the funded fellows have returned to Latin America, which we think is really, really great. When you apply to the program, it's not binding in that you don't have to say, I know I'm going back, I already have a job, because we realize that could be kind of hard. You're probably just finishing your PhD now, you're looking to do your postdoc in the US, and you may not know when or where you're going to return to several years from now. But we do hope that if you are applying to the program, your intent is to go back in the future. And of course, we understand that doesn't always work out for personal reasons or other reasons, but we're really happy that there is such a large percentage of our fellows going back and doing really fantastic science in Latin America. So we hope to see that continue. So this is a bit old now, but a couple of really just kind of want to plug the program and why it can be so great. And so we did a survey of alumni in 2013 to understand kind of how the fellows felt this program impacted their career. For many of them, it made them more competitive for getting a job back in Latin America, because they said, they can say, I'm coming in and I'm bringing $70,000 worth of equipment with me. And that's really attractive to a university. And that was essential for setting up their labs. Additionally, being a part of this program, and I'll talk a bit more about it, but helped expand their network of colleagues, because we bring people in as a class. You get to know your classmates, you get to meet at the annual meeting, but in addition to that, you now have a network of 300 alumni that have come through this program over the years and are really happy to talk to the new people in the program and give advice who are people more junior in their career. Kind of similarly, having the Pew program on your resume has made individuals more visible to peers in their field. Being a part of this fellowship helped jumpstart their careers, and it also helped increase the standard and rigor of their science by getting the training in the US, meeting new people, and just being challenged to think differently about the research they're doing. Oh, and this is a picture of one of our more recent fellows, Anna, who just returned to Argentina recently. And this is a picture of her with all of the equipment and supplies that she bought with the Pew funding. So she was really excited and happy to show us that everything made it there, and she was going to unpack and start setting things up. Okay, so this is the timeline for the upcoming grant cycle. And I'll just mention that the timeline is really similar each year. So if you are at the beginning of your PhD right now, the exact dates won't matter so much, but you can kind of get a feel for how our timeline works every year, because we run one competition a year, so it's very similar. So I'll talk a lot on the next couple of slides about how you can find a sponsor lab in the US to do your postdoc. But what we encourage is that you spend a lot of time doing this and making sure that you find the right place to do your postdoc, because that is really key to your scientific success, but also your happiness in terms of finding the place that's the right fit and going to give you the right support. So I'll talk about that in a bit. This June 6, 2022 is when the next application cycle will open. The application is open for about 2.5 months for you to work on all of the parts of it. And I'll go through the components of the application again on a later slide. We ask for reference letters for the application, and those are due on August 3rd. And the actual application itself is due on August 17th. So we ask for the reference letters to come in a couple of weeks early. It gives us some time to chase down any reference letter writer who might be late, because we realize that is out of your control as an applicant, and we want to make sure we get them in to keep your application moving. We then go through a review process that I'll talk about over the next, 6 months, from September, October through March. And again, I'll go through what those rounds look like. And by April of 2023, applicants are notified of a decision. Next June, our Pew's Board of Directors will officially approve the new grantees, and the grant would start in August of 2023. So it's a long process. So it's good, depending on where you are in your education right now, thinking about where you might be in this timeline to think about when you might want to consider applying. So kind of a similar note about the award eligibility. This is the eligibility for the upcoming application cycle. And if you're not ready to apply for this cycle, just kind of adjust the dates by a year or 2 years when you think you might apply. Again, it stays pretty consistent. So for the upcoming cycle, individuals need to have their PhD finished either between June 6, 2017 or February 1st, 2023. So again, if you're finishing your PhD soon, this could be a good opportunity for you. The February 1st deadline can be flexible. If you're not sure, it might be February, it might be March. Again, reach out to us and ask us these questions, because we can be flexible depending on your situation. So again, never hesitate to ask. When you are applying for this program, you have to have a sponsor identified in the United States who says that should you get the Pew Award, you can come and do your postdoc in their lab. You don't have to have started in the lab yet, but this sponsor will be writing a letter of support for your application. And again, they need to know, should you get this award, you need to come and work in their lab. And some individuals may hire you on as a postdoc, even if you wouldn't get the Pew funding, but we do want to make sure that they're going to take you on if you get this fellowship. And we ask for the sponsor to not be your PhD advisor. So if you happen to be doing your PhD in the US and want to apply to this program, we want you to change labs so that you're growing your science and expanding with a new experience. If you've already started your postdoc in the US, then we ask that you have not started until January of this year. We're really trying to aim this program at individuals who haven't had extensive training in the US to this date. And so postdoctoral training. So anybody who has already had several years of a postdoc in the US is not going to be eligible to apply. And then in terms of other fellowship programs, we typically have a conflict for other programs. So if you're applying to the Pew Latin American Fellowship Program, but also the Human Frontiers or Life Sciences Research Award, all of these grant programs provide postdoc salary. So it's typically hard to accept two of them, because we would like to give you the salary and then another group would like to give you the salary as well. So you can apply for as many programs as you want, but should you get the Pew program and another program, you may have to choose between the two of them. Though we're always open to talking with that other organization to figure out if there's a way for you to hold both of them. Okay, so what are we looking at? And by we have these fantastic review committees of scientists who are looking at the applications and scoring them and providing recommendations to us. So applications are evaluated basically looking at 3 different categories. So the applicant, you, what has your research experience been to date? Do you have publications? And what is your commitment to furthering your research career in Latin America? So as I said before, you don't need to have a future job commitment for coming back to Latin America, but we do ask for a statement about, what are your goals and what are you looking to do if you think past your postdoc and coming back and establishing research in Peru or another country in Latin America. So that's one aspect of the evaluation. Then there's a research project proposal, part of the application, and that is considered a huge part of the application, where the review committee really wants to see that the applicant is going to learn new skills and evolve in your scientific expertise. That doesn't mean you have to change, scientific fields completely. Like if you are a neuroscientist, you now have to go to a microbiology lab. But what we want to see and what our reviewers want to see is that there is an evolution and that you're going to gain new skills and learn to think differently from what you did in your thesis work. And we really want to see innovative and creative projects. So things, that haven't been done before. So when you're working on your project proposal, it should be written by you, but you can work with your sponsor on it. So what we don't want to see is that your sponsor wrote an NIH grant and that you took a piece out of it and submitted it to Pew. It should be written by you, but again, the project itself, you should be talking to your sponsor, you should be throwing ideas around together and really thinking about what you want your work to be. And then the sponsor lab, like where you're going to do your work, is also strongly considered in the evaluation of the application. We think it's extremely important, the training environment. We want to make sure that the lab you're going to has a good level of funding. Again, we ask that they supplement the Pew funds to make sure you're getting paid at the NIH level. Additionally, since we only provide 2 years of funding for U.S. study, often postdocs take longer than 2 years. And it's great if you have the opportunity to stay in that lab past 2 years by getting funding from the sponsor lab. And it's also great to see that the sponsor has a good track record or a good history of training postdocs. So we want to see that they are really going to be your champion, and they will help you develop not just your lab skills, but also your professional skills as well, and help you as you start to look for jobs, as you start to interview for that independent research career. So we think that's really important. And so that's one of the reasons why we want you to take a lot of time to find the right lab, but also why the review committee thinks really carefully about that and making sure we're giving support to people who will have good support from their sponsor. So the review process is broken down into 2 parts. So we have the first stage of review is done by regional committees in Latin America who are former Pew grantees. So they came through the program years ago, they've gone back to Latin America, they've set up their own labs, and they're doing fantastic research. So right now, and as I mentioned, most of our applicants come from Argentina, Brazil, Chile, and Mexico. So we have a review committee, in Argentina. They're going to review all of the applications from Argentina. Right now, any application that's coming in that's not from one of those 4 countries is put together into one bucket and reviewed by a committee made up of individuals from Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Mexico, and we have a member from Nicaragua as well. So the goal is that we don't have to do this, that once we have more than 1 or 2 applicants from Peru every year, we can make a committee that will just be reviewing Peruvian applications. So again, there's been sporadic applications from other countries, not just Peru, but Colombia, Uruguay, Ecuador, and those numbers are starting to go up. So that's hopefully going to cause us to change how this review process works, and we'll be able to give more focused regional review committee for countries with more applications down the line. So each of those regional committees reviews their pile of applications. They will select a subset of those applicants for interview. In the pre-COVID days, those were potentially in person. Now they're Zoom, but potentially in person again if it's safe to do so. And so they'll interview candidates, and then each committee comes up with their top 6 applicants and moves them on to the next round. Once that happens, we are then down to 30 applications, so 6 from the 5 committees that I mentioned, and then those go on to review by a national advisory committee, which is a 12-member committee made up of scientists working in the United States. The majority of these scientists actually have very strong ties to Latin America, either grew up in Latin America or have worked extensively in Latin America, but they're doing their research in the US right now. And they review the top 30 applications that came out of the regional committee review and select 10 for funding. And I have these committee lists at the end so you can see who's on the different committees as well. Okay, as I mentioned before, I think one of the most important parts is finding a good postdoctoral sponsor if you want to apply to this program. You do need to identify that sponsor and have them, sign on to supporting your application prior to sending it in to us. Everyone has a different experience in finding a sponsor. Sometimes you've already collaborated with somebody in the US and that's who you want to work with, or you've met somebody at a scientific conference and that's who you want to work with. And other times individuals have no idea who they want to work with. It's wide open. There's so many labs in the US and it can be really overwhelming. So we've tried to put together some advice to help you sort through all of the options and figure out where to go. One is that you can seek advice from our regional committees or program fellows or alumni. So we have a good directory online where you can see the current Latin American fellows. If you see that somebody worked in a lab that you're interested in, you could reach out to them and find out about their experience in that lab. Did they like the mentor? Did they like the science, etc.? We also recommend that you reach out to me and my team, again, if you don't know, and you tell us what your interests are. What research field are you looking for? Because we often get contacted by labs who want to host a Latin American fellow. And so we have a spreadsheet, every year of who is asked. And so then we try to match you. So if somebody has said, I would love to host a fellow, and you say, I'm looking for a sponsor, and you have similar interests, we'll at least connect you to start having that discussion. You may decide not to go there or not to use that sponsor, but we can be a resource for you as well. Some other resources that we recommend are looking at the Pew Scholars and Pew Stewart Scholars directory. This is not a requirement. You do not need to use a Pew Scholar or a Pew Stewart Scholar as a sponsor. These are the 2 other grant programs I mentioned at the very beginning of the program. And so these are US-based scientists that we're giving funding to earlier in their career as their assistant professors. But these 2 programs have been going on for a long time. So we have a really big network of US-based scientists. They're very familiar with the Latin American program from their time with Pew. And so a lot of times they're very interested in hosting Latin American fellows. So again, it's not a requirement that you work with a Pew Scholar or a Pew Stewart Scholar. However, it's a nice directory to search. You can look by keyword or research field or institution, and you might get an idea of somebody to work with. And also, it's easy. If you're having trouble getting in touch with them, we can connect you with them. They will probably be pretty responsive because they know us through the Pew programs. And finally, you can look specifically at the Latin American Fellows Program Directory, and on each person's profile page, it lists the sponsor lab that they worked in the US. So these could be current fellows, but you can also look, from 10 years ago and see labs that people were working in. And sometimes that's a nice way to see as well, because those were successful sponsor labs in the past. Okay, so again, we're trying to make something that can sometimes seem overwhelming, finding a lab in all of the United States, which is quite big. So we kind of recommend to start breaking it down in a few ways. You could think whether or not there's geographic restrictions that might help you narrow your search, whether there are particular institutions where you know they have a really strong department or technique in your research field that you want to go and learn. Is there a specific technique you want to learn or a model organism that you want to work with or develop that you could bring back to Peru in the future? And then think about if you have any connections from conferences or if your PhD advisor has any connections and they could help set you up for some discussions. We advise for you to make a long list as you're starting this. I always say at least 10. And maybe you don't need to if you've already met somebody at a conference, but if you're starting from scratch, I think you should start bigger and narrow down as you start thinking about what might be a good fit for you. Because oftentimes you might think you find the perfect lab, at least just based on a website or based on a description, but they might not be hiring, they might not have space. Or you might talk to them and they might not be a good fit just in terms of the way that they work. So again, I recommend starting with a long list and then narrowing it down as you start to talk to those sponsors. So after you have your list, reach out to the sponsor, see if they are hiring postdoctoral fellows. I would mention that you want to apply for this Pew program so they know that there's a potential for you to come in with your own funding. That always makes people more open, I think, even to hiring if they're not hiring at the time. And then set up phone or Zoom interviews to talk with them. Again, visit labs if possible, but I think in the Zoom world, maybe more things are done virtually. And then decide what's the best sponsor lab for you, and then work on your application. So again, we just want you to take time and make sure there's a good fit, both scientifically but also culturally, and that the people there are really kind and helpful during this stage of your career. Okay, so in terms of the application, as I mentioned, it opens in June every year. The exact date changes a little bit year to year, but every June we open a new competition. And to get access to the application, you just email us at this Fellows app email address here, and we will give you a login, the login link. In the application, just to give you a little sneak peek, we ask for several different things, but it's not too extensive. A lot of it's like background information and then your scientific proposal. So we'll ask for some of your CV information, which is really just who are you, what's your name, what sponsor are you proposing to work with, where have you done your education so far, and do you have any publications and awards you want to list. We have 2 short personal statements. These are just 1 paragraph each. We ask, as I mentioned before, what is your idea about returning to Latin America in the future? Again, you don't need a job lined up, but we would like to know what you think you're going to do down the line. And then we'll ask you to just give us your opinion on, or your kind of thoughts on your most impactful research contribution during graduate school. Then we will ask for you to request 3 letters of reference from scientists who are familiar with your work. So we don't specify who that has to be, but very often it's going to be people from your thesis lab, such as your advisor, such as other people in your department, or people you've collaborated with. So more senior level scientists who can talk about how fantastic you are, or what science you've done, and why you'll be great for the program. Then we request for your scientific research proposal. So this is writing up what your project will be in the sponsor lab in the US, should you get the fellowship. So it's 5 pages, double spaced, and that includes like embedding figures into the text. And it needs to be written by you, but that doesn't mean it should only be thought of by you, right? We know you're still learning, you're still training, and it really should be through many discussions with your sponsor that you come up and kind of refine this project proposal. But again, it shouldn't be your sponsor wrote an NIH grant and you cut and paste a section of it into this proposal. But we do want you to make sure that they have read it, they have helped you with it. That is perfectly fine. And then finally, we ask for a letter from the sponsor, again, attesting to the fact that they will support you. We want them to tell us their training plan, what sort of resources do they have at the university, what will they provide for you, not both in your scientific development, but also your professional development, so that you're ready to interview for jobs. And then they also submit their CV to us so we can see, make sure that they have a good level of funding to support you outside of the Pew funds. Okay, so I'm getting to the end so we can do some questions, but just again, another plug on why you should apply. I don't even know if Andrea's seen this fun photo, but it's really unique program. We think of it as not just like writing a check so somebody can do some really cool experiments in the US. It's a really unique international training opportunity. For one, a lot of the NIH training grants here have citizenship requirement or green card requirement. And so this program does not have that, of course. The goal is to seed international training opportunities. So that's really important. It's also really unique in providing the funds for the lab equipment upon your return to Latin America. But outside of those two things, in terms of the money, it's really fantastic in developing a special community and network through our annual meetings. So every year, you get to come together for 3 years when you're in the program with not just your class. So this is the most recent 2021 class of Pew Latin American Fellows at our meeting in March in California. But there are 2 other years in the program, so there are 30 Latin American Fellows there. We had our National Review Committee members there. We have members from our regional committees there. And we have the Pew Scholars and the Pew Stewart Scholars. So our junior faculty grantees are also at this meeting. So you get to develop really great networks, both with the other Latin American grantees, but also junior faculty and assistant professors that are in the US. And you get to talk science, but you also get a lot of these professional connections that are going to help you for years to come. When you return back to Latin America, then you have this fantastic alumni network of 200 scientists who have come through the Pew program, who again are really excited to help any of the more junior scientists just setting up their labs. So it's much more than a check and an opportunity to do science. We really think about your development and how can we help you network and grow to be very successful. And really, one thing I didn't mention, but in terms of the research fields that we fund, I've been saying biomedical research this whole time. It's very broad. Neuroscience, microbiology, genetics, biophysics, computational biology, anything, within this broader biomedical science umbrella we fund. If you are not sure, please contact us if you think you're working in a field